fabled heat, where magic meets desire. Subscribe to ignite the fantasy.
The rain wasn't falling, it was a barrage of ice-sharp shards that turned the mountain pass into a frozen river of glass. Each drop struck the windshield with a staccato hiss, like tiny knives slicing through the world. My knuckles were white around the steering wheel of the borrowed Range Rover, the leather slick with a thin sheen of sweat, despite the sub-zero air that seemed to seep through every seam of the vehicle. The GPS sputtered, then died, as if the mountain itself were swallowing signals, leaving me alone with the howl of a wind that sounded like a pack of wolves circling a lone prey. I'm Adrian Thorne, founder of Thorne Dynamics, a man who built an empire on control. Every variable was mapped, every contingency planned, until the world tilted. The rover shuddered, the chassis groaning under the weight of the storm, and with a sickening thunk the engine coughed its final breath. A low, metallic whine rose from the exhaust before the silence fell, thick as the fog that now swallowed the road, broken only by the relentless wind that seemed to whisper my name. I forced the vehicle to a halt on a narrow ledge, the tires skidding on a thin film of ice before finally giving way. The world became a whitewashed void, the pine trees reduced to silhouettes, their branches bending like the arms of ancient sentinels. My breath came out in ragged clouds, each exhale a fleeting ghost that vanished before it could touch the ground. She was already there, leaning against a twisted pine that had become a blackened sentinel. Alara Vance, my corporate nemesis, the woman whose name had haunted boardrooms and late-night negotiations for 18 months. Her coat was drenched, the fur lining clinging to her skin, but the heat that radiated from her body was unmistakable, a pulse that matched the frantic beating of my own heart. She stood with the poise of a queen in exile, eyes narrowed against the storm, yet there was a flicker of something softer, perhaps amusement, perhaps something else entirely. "Looks like we're stranded," she said, voice low, a hint of amusement flickering beneath the fear. The words cut through the wind like a blade, yet they carried a warmth that seemed to push back against the cold. I could see the faint outline of a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth, a smile that had survived boardroom battles and hostile takeovers. The storm intensified, and from the swirling white a massive wolf emerged, its fur a storm gray, eyes glowing amber like twin lanterns in the night. I recognized the ancient sigil etched into its flank, a mark of the lycanthrope covenant, a secret order that could bend the very elements. The creature moved with a predatory grace, each step leaving a faint imprint in the snow, as if the mountain itself were being rewritten with its presence. Instinct took over. I grabbed a skillet from the back seat, the metal cold against my palm, and hurled it at the beast. It sang through the air, a thin metallic whine, and struck the wolf's flank with a dull thud. The animal snarled, a guttural sound that vibrated through my bones, and lunged forward, teeth bared, jaws snapping inches from my throat. In the chaos, Alara shoved me behind her, her body a solid shield of heat and breath. Her coat brushed against my cheek, the fur lining leaving a faint imprint of warmth on my skin. Our bodies collided, her heart hammered against my chest, the heat of her skin searing through the chill that tried to claim me. I could feel the electric charge of magic crackling in the air, the wolf's growl reverberating through my bones like a drumbeat. She pressed her lips to my ear, breath hot against my skin. "You always think you can out-engineer everything, Adrian." The words were a promise and a challenge, and I felt a surge of longing I had never allowed myself to acknowledge. The scent of pine sap mixed with the metallic tang of blood filled my nostrils, grounding me in the present even as my mind raced. The wolf snapped its jaws inches from my throat. I twisted, using the skillet as a lever, and drove it into the creature's flank. The metal bit deep and the beast howled, a sound that seemed to split the night, echoing off the cliffs like a mournful choir. The wolf staggered, its amber eyes flickering with pain, but it was far from defeated. Alara's hand found the small of my back, fingers digging into my shirt, grounding me. "Run," she whispered, but I could not move. My gaze locked with hers, and in that frozen instant I understood. She was no longer a rival. She was the fire I'd been chasing, the heat that could melt the ice around my heart. We fought side by side, steel and magic clashing against fur and fang. I could feel the raw animal power thrumming beneath the wolf's fur as I grappled with its snout, the creature's breath hot and fetid on my face. Alara's eyes burned with a fierce protectiveness, and I felt a surge of something deeper, desire, fear, and an unexpected tenderness that made my chest tighten in a way spreadsheets never could. The wolf, wounded but ferocious, lunged again, its claws raking the snow, sending shards of ice flying like glittering daggers. I caught its snout, feeling the pulse of its heart beat against my palm, a rhythm that matched my own. Alara's voice cut through the roar of the wind, sharp and commanding. "Hold it, Adrian, aim for the heart." I remembered the old legends of the Covenant, how a single, precise strike could sever the magical tether that bound a lycanthrope to its animal form. With a surge of adrenaline, I drove the skillet deeper, feeling the metal bite into flesh and bone. The wolf's howl turned into a guttural whine, then a final, mournful keening as it collapsed onto the snow, its body folding into itself like a dying star. When the beast finally fell, the storm seemed to sigh, the wind easing as if the mountain itself were exhaling. Snowflakes, once sharp as glass, now drifted lazily, catching the faint glow of the moon that had finally broken through the clouds. We stood, breathless, bodies slick with rain and blood, the scent of pine and ozone filling the air. "Looks like we have a new plan," Alara said, a crooked smile breaking through the frost. Her eyes, now softened, reflected the faint light, and I could see the faint lines of fatigue etched around them, signs of a woman who had fought battles far beyond boardrooms. I laughed, a sound cracked and genuine, echoing off the cliffs. "A plan that starts with you and me together." The words felt strange on my tongue, as if I were reciting a mantra I had never practiced. We didn't have a road to follow. The mountain pass was a jagged scar in the landscape, the wrecked rover a twisted monument to my hubris. Yet for the first time in years I felt a thrill not of control, but of surrender, to her, to the magic, to the unknown future we would carve out of the storm. We gathered the wreckage, salvaging what we could. The metal of the rover was cold, but the fire in Alara's eyes warmed my hands as we pried open the doors. Inside, the dashboard flickered weakly, a reminder of the technology I had built and the limits it now faced. I pulled a portable power cell from my bag, a prototype I had been developing for emergency situations. The cell hummed to life, casting a soft blue glow that cut through the darkness. "Give me a moment," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I connected the cell to the rover's dead battery, hoping to coax a spark of life from the machine. The engine coughed, sputtered, and then roared back to life, a deep, resonant growl that seemed to shake the very rocks. Alara stepped back, arms crossed, watching me with a mixture of admiration and teasing skepticism. "You really can't resist a good challenge, can you?" she asked, her tone light but her eyes sharp. I smiled, feeling the heat of the engine's exhaust against my cheek. "Control is an illusion, Alara. It's the moments when we lose it that define us." She moved closer, the fur of her coat brushing against my arm. The scent of her perfume, something woody, with a hint of amber, mixed with the crisp mountain air, creating a heady perfume that made my pulse quicken. "Then let's make sure we both lose it together," she whispered, her breath warm against my ear. The words sent a shiver down my spine, not from cold but from anticipation. We climbed back into the rover, the seats creaking under our weight. The windshield wipers fought the rain, sweeping away the remnants of the storm as we began to move forward. The road ahead was still treacherous, a narrow ribbon of black asphalt winding through cliffs and sheer drops, but the world felt different now. The snow glittered like diamonds under the moonlight, and the wind sang a softer tune, as if acknowledging our victory. As we drove, I found my mind drifting back to the moments before the wolf appeared. The sigil on its flank, an ancient rune of the lycanthrope covenant, had pulsed with a faint blue light, a reminder that magic still lingered in the veins of this world. I had always dismissed such myths as folklore, but tonight, standing beside Alara, I felt the weight of those stories settle into my bones. "Do you believe in magic, Adrian?" she asked, glancing at me over her shoulder. I hesitated, the steering wheel cool beneath my fingers. I believed in numbers, in data, in predictability. But tonight I saw something that can't be measured. My voice cracked slightly, betraying the vulnerability I rarely allowed. She smiled, a soft, genuine curve of her lips. "That's the first step. Accepting that there are forces beyond our control. It's what makes life interesting." The rover's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the road ahead. I could see the faint outline of a small cabin perched on a ledge, its windows glowing amber. A place of refuge, perhaps, or a waypoint for travelers lost in the storm. "We should head there," I suggested, feeling a sudden urge to protect her, to keep her safe from whatever else the mountain might throw at us. She nodded, her eyes reflecting the light of the cabin. "Lead the way, Mr. Thorne." The title felt oddly intimate now, stripped of its corporate armor. The engine purred, the tires gripping the icy road with renewed confidence. As we ascended, the wind began to die down, the storm retreating like a beast that had been satisfied. The sky cleared just enough to reveal a tapestry of stars, each one a cold fire burning in the void. Inside the cabin, a fire crackled in a stone hearth, casting dancing shadows on the wooden walls. An elderly woman, her hair silvered with age, looked up from a steaming mug and offered us a nod of welcome. She introduced herself as Meles, a keeper of the mountain's secrets. "Travelers," she said, her voice soft yet resonant, "the mountain tests those who pass through. You have faced its fury and emerged stronger." She gestured to a worn rug where we could sit. Ilara slipped off her coat, revealing a simple dress underneath, the fur lining now draped over a chair. She brushed a strand of wet hair from her face, and I could see the faint glow of the sigil still faintly visible on her wrist, a reminder of the Covenant's lingering influence. We sat by the fire, the heat wrapping around us like a blanket. I pulled out a notebook from my bag, the pages filled with schematics and equations, but tonight they seemed irrelevant. Instead, I opened a fresh page and began to write, not with numbers, but with words. Tonight, the mountain gave me a lesson I could not have programmed into any algorithm. It taught me that control is an illusion, that surrender can be a strength, and that the heart, I paused, looking at Ilara, that heart can be both a weapon and a shield. She reached across the table, her hand warm against mine. "And what will you do with that lesson, Adrian?" I squeezed her hand gently. "I'll build a future where we don't have to fight the storm, but learn to dance with it, with you." The words felt like a promise, a vow that stretched beyond the confines of the cabin walls. She leaned in, her forehead resting against mine, and for a moment the world fell away. The fire crackled, the wind whispered outside, and the mountain seemed to hold its breath, as if honoring the pact we had forged. When the night grew deep and the fire dwindled to embers, we lay on a blanket of furs, the stars above us a silent audience. I could feel the rhythm of her breathing, the rise and fall of her chest, and I realized that the storm outside had never truly been about ice or wind. It had been about the barriers we built around ourselves. In the quiet, I whispered, "I've spent my life constructing walls, Adrian. I've built empires on foundations of steel and glass. But tonight, I see that the strongest structures are built from trust, from shared danger, from the willingness to let someone else see the raw, unfiltered you." She smiled, a soft, contented smile that lit up her face even in the dim light. "Then let's tear those walls down together, one brick at a time." The dawn began to creep over the peaks, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean, the snow glistening like a field of diamonds. We rose, our bodies stiff from the night's exertions, but our spirits buoyed by a newfound purpose. Outside, the mountain road stretched ahead, a ribbon of possibility. I turned the key, the rover's engine humming with renewed vigor. Ilara slipped back into her coat, the fur lining now a symbol of the warmth we had found in each other. "Ready?" she asked, a playful glint in her amber eyes. I nodded, feeling the weight of the steering wheel less like a burden and more like a conduit for the journey ahead. Always. Together we drove into the sunrise, the mountain's silhouette receding behind us, the memory of the wolf's howl fading into a distant echo. The road ahead was still treacherous, the world still unpredictable, but for the first time in years I felt a thrill not of control, but of surrender to her, to the magic, to the unknown future we would carve out of the storm.